Hi, anyone and everyone. Welcome to Have You Heard About This Case? My name is Sam.
And my name is Kelly.
We have a special announcement today. We are officially on YouTube.
Yes, it is. We're already connecting with people there.
Yeah, we're very excited about it. Our big reason for joining YouTube is so that it's easier to comment and have communication back and forth directly on our episodes. So we hope that anyone who wants to join us there can watch our episodes. They're just the thumbnails of our Instagram images, but we'll be there every Thursday, just like we are on normal podcast feed. So we hope to see you over there.
Drop in, and if you know anything, if you've heard anything, that's why we started this podcast.
Yeah. Share it with anyone who, if you're interested in that case, especially an unsolved case.
Yes, please spread those.
See more eyes get on those, and hopefully more people just involved that might have some answers.
Yeah, absolutely. And this one today, it's funny that you bring up unsolved cases because this one ran the gamut. And we're going to talk about a case today. It's pretty well covered in our sphere of true crime right now, but I was taking a look at most of the coverage and I decided we should definitely just now that we have closure on this case, take a look at it in its entirety because the details were just finalized in 2023.
Oh, recent.
Yeah, so a lot of people had posted an episode about our victim. Her name is Sonia Herok-Stone, and her case went unsolved for 40 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so a lot. It was definitely considered a cold case. And so we're going to go from the crime through the entire discovery that has been made recently and definitively solved, her murder. But before we take in Sonia's story in its entirety, Sam, do you have a question today?
I do. What are 3 songs currently on your playlist?
That's a really good question because Spotify will just make you those mix feeds, and I love them. But also, so, okay, number 1 is definitely Cardi B's new single, Enough, Miami.
Oh, I have not heard that.
It's a really good. And then, I just have a playlist called Spotify Pick Good. In the mixes, they roll in the new songs. So I grabbed the best of those. So, Enough, Miami, and then it's a little older, but I like it. Cardi B. I'm listening to a lot of Cardi B right now, and when it's not Cardi B, I have Boa on here, Megan Thee Stallion, and then I'm rolling through it. I also have Click Clack on here, Todd Trickle.
Oh, I've heard that one.
Yeah. So it's very much a vibe in here of ladies, ladies, ladies. And I love it because I'm going to keep touting ladies because this case is just. Sorry, I really just jumped. I didn't. Ladies. But what about you? What are your 3?
Well, if we want to stick with the ladies theme, well, partially. There's one I have to call out just because I'm very excited for something coming up in the near future. But I've listened to a lot of Ida Mae recently, which is a male-female duo. They're fantastic. I'm listening to a lot of K-Flay, who's she's pretty big, but she's originally from north suburbs of Chicago. So she's played on a lot on Chicago radio.
Yeah, hey girl.
Right?
That's like a postmodern jukebox. How we got lucky because Haley Reinhart is from this area. So she always comes to the postmodern jukebox shows here because it's easy for her.
Right.
We always get kind of like that little treat.
Yeah, I've never seen K-Flay live, but I would love to. I think she puts on such a fun-looking show, and her music's pretty unique. It's not my typical type of music, and I don't even honestly know how to describe it, but she's great. And then, of course, they're always on some sort of playlist is Ghost, and they're coming out with their like concert film in like 2 weeks. And I'm so excited for it. Yeah, I unfortunately can't go. It's in theaters and I can't.
Oh, they're just in theaters?
At least for now. But yeah, that's the weekend that I'm going to be out of town, so I'm going to miss it.
Oh, that sucks.
I know, my sister and I, because I'm going to be with my sister, and we were looking up, like, is there any theater near where we are going? And the answer is no. Definitely not.
That's not fair. That's unjust to both of you. If you guys knew how much they both love Ghost, it's not fair.
Yeah, we're very sad about it, but we got to do what we got to do.
Right. Oh, rats. That's the thing about, like, Chicago is awesome because a lot of people do pop-up shows, a lot of musicians, a lot of comedians, but it's one of those things that, like, you sort of get swept up in the chatter in the crowd, or you hear, like, on Twitter the next day, like, oh, Amy Schumer was at the Laugh Factory trying out new material. Were you at the Laugh Factory last night? And I'm like, no, I was in my bed last night. Why didn't anybody tell me or anything?
But there's always those few that's like you keep your eye on, so you know when something's happening. Like when the Foo Fighters made Studio 666. I was like, I am going in the theater. I don't care.
I'm busy.
Yeah. And
I'm busy that day.
You and Adam joined us, and it was like terrible weather. And I'm like, I don't care. I am going to see this in the theater. And that's how it is with the Ghost show. But it's not working out this time.
That's such a bummer. Most of the bands I love, somebody's dead now. Right. And, like, what do we do? Like, and I don't know if we've landed anywhere with Modest Mouse yet. Everybody's dropping content bombs, so I don't know. Like, Dolly Parton just announced her musical today in our timeline. When you hear this,
right? What did Modest Mouse do? There was something with them, but I don't remember what it was.
Well, Modest Mouse, the one of the original founding members, he was the drummer. He died.
I forgot about that. It was like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah, and Sam and I, Sam, were lucky enough we saw their last Chicago show as the original lineup.
Yeah, I remember you going to that.
Oh my God, I've been waiting and waiting and waiting on that I've been waiting to see Modest Mouse since high school. And I never really know what's going on, huh? It looks like they're playing still.
They probably did get another drummer. Foo Fighters did.
That's true. Can we have a quick reminder on who is the new Foo Fighters drummer?
Josh Freese, I think his name is. I think.
Okay. He did get it. He bagged it then. All right.
Yeah, I can't remember if his first name is Josh or not, but I'm sure it's Freese. This is his last name.
Yeah. I remember the last name being like that for who is in contention.
Yeah, they had I don't know if it's on YouTube or something, but they did a really fun live stream to announce him where they just like jammed. And it was essentially their rehearsal for a show where they all just kind of got in a room, played, chit-chatted about the songs and like how they wanted to slightly change them or what they liked that he did. It was really fun.
Oh, God, that sounds fun. And, you know, that's such a good idea. Dave Grohl is just such a good storyteller. Like, I feel like he just knocks it out of the park.
He needs to write more books. Like,
I wish.
I really hope he does.
Oh, please, Dave Grohl. I know that you're super busy playing drums and the guitar and grieving your loss and healing the world with your music. Because you also write another book.
Right.
Yeah, and being a parent also, could you write another book? Because the first one was fantastic.
It was so good.
I just want to focus today on Sonia Herok-Stone, but we have to talk about this creep who took her from all of us, because today we're going to Monterey County, California, the I said that kind of weird, but this is located directly on the west coast of the United States in California. If you're not familiar, you might have heard of Monterey Bay, California. A lot of people have. Given the location on the ocean, you can imagine Monterey is a community of people who are quite wealthy.
And say, have you seen Big Little Lies?
I haven't.
Oh, it's such a good show, but it takes place there, and it gives you like a fantastic visual of what it's like.
Oh my gosh.
It's such a good show. Highly recommend it.
I haven't watched the show, so I don't know what to compare them, but now I'm definitely going to watch the show because following this case, like I was just like, wow. So like everybody here is really, really wealthy because it's a beautiful location and it has among the highest sticker price in houses in California.
Wow.
So like in the whole state. And then it consistently pops up in the highest in America at large. So it's so expensive to live here. As of 2024, it has a total crime rate index of 13%, meaning by their factoring, Neighborhood Scouts factoring, it is safer than 13% of U.S. cities. And that sounds like a bit of a qualifier there. I don't know. Because they also offered on their website that 13% was high for the area. And I was like...
Yes, I don't quite understand, like, what... Like, I get what 13% is, but what's the threshold? Like,
yeah, they were offering very mixed messaging. Like, no, it's safer than, like, 13% of cities. And you're like, that's not a lot of cities. Wait. Because the tragic murder of a 30-year-old single mother of a 4-year-old, Sonia Herok-Stone, definitely shook the community on October 15th, 1981. So 40 years. And Sonia was just a beautiful woman. She cut a gorgeous figure, tall, with like long brown hair that went all the way down to her waist. And she just seemed so cool. And she was born in 1951. And though the exact date has eluded me, her birthday. But she was born one of 6 kids to her parents.
Oh, big family.
Yeah, she was born a lot of them. And big family, so, and you can kind of see here in the beginning, big family, so that's the environment she grew up in Quebec, Canada. And she moved from Quebec to Carmel, California in the 1970s. So that would put her right in her 20s and ready to move, which I think we all can relate to.
Mm-hmm. Is Carmel near Monterey?
Carmel is a city in Monterey County.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes, and it is beautiful. I've actually been there. It was gorgeous. It was the most beautiful vistas I've seen, but I can't imagine. I don't know how you would go about living there.
Right.
Because it's just like a gorgeous, rugged outback painting. Like, the truth is you have to have a lot of money to figure it out.
It's the money thing. Like, you can do it, but you need the money.
Yeah, you can figure it. You're gonna have to do a little figuring. But she moved like totally, like she was like countries away. And in theory, she's moving to like the best area she could be because, it's like all this wealth is happening there and, the crime is 13% of whatever, and they wouldn't obviously have that data in the 1970s, but they would know that Carmel is in the Monterey Bay area and thus, a very nice neighborhood.
Right.
And so in her previous life in Canada, one David Foreman was in love with her. And after he moved to California, she followed him. She dipped from Quebec because she was in love with David. And she wanted to be married, but they were in their 20s. And David didn't want to make the commitment that she required. Facts are facts.
Right. And yeah, you both need to be on the same page.
Yeah, like you have a requirement there. Like this is what I want to do. X, Y, Z. And she wanted a husband and to build a family early. And he was just, they stayed extremely tight. He said it was broadcast by W5 CTV News, because a lot of this coverage I'm getting is coming from out of Canada. So I would love to, I'll probably shout out some podcasts from Canada that likely have some maybe good local information on this case.
Oh, nice.
Because that would, I would be interested. And so she stays extremely tight with David, and he said, quote, going from boyfriend, girlfriend to brother and sister.
Okay, so they decided that they were done because they weren't on the same page and kind of respected each other's opposite opinions.
Yes, they just parted ways. And so, yeah, but he said that they were still close, like a brother-sister bond. So that's just the way she ends up in Carmel, California. She had followed David Foreman. And shortly after their breakup, she met and married Michael Stone, who says that they had, quote, a pretty amazing life together in the early years. End quote.
Early years.
Right. I was like, the first part of that is good. The second part isn't so great.
Right.
Sonia had their daughter Sasha in 1977. And Michael Stone recalls them being excited that she was going to have a baby. It was 100% planned. They were excited. And David became her godfather.
Oh, nice.
So they're very tight. So, however, the marriage to Stone, it started to falter, like we just talked about, how like the first part of that statement's good and the second part isn't so great. Because it started to falter to where it failed after Stone was fired from a high-paying executive job, and Sonia was suffering by Stone's account with some, quote, pre- and postpartum depression, end quote.
And that, like, one of those things could put major strain on a relationship. But also, I'm assuming with the way that you said according to Stone's account, that maybe his account isn't accurate or to be trusted.
Well, all I'm saying is that we don't have Sonia's side.
Fair.
And you can't really diagnose somebody like that on television. I was surprised that he said just like, she definitely had pre and postpartum depression. Like, sir, are you a doctor? Why are you saying this on TV? But ultimately, David was the one who he tells W5 that their marriage wasn't going to last ever because they were just, quote, two different people, according to David.
Do you know how quick she got with Michael after breaking up with David?
I don't know. I just know shortly thereafter, because Sasha comes in 1977.
Because I just wonder, like, how rushed was it? Like, was it within a year she was getting married, or was it 2 or 3 years later? Because depending on how much they gave to their relationship ahead of time, they just might not have really known each other and been okay with those differences. And they didn't even know each other had them.
Yeah, it seems to me like it was done like very hastily and very much like, we mentioned just very early on that she came from a big family. She just used to having a lot of siblings. She wanted to, maybe her base foundation value there was like start a family.
Yeah, if that's what you want, that's fine.
Right.
But it looks like people on the outside realized that it just wasn't right.
Yeah, like maybe we just, tied the knot and had the kid, and we didn't realize that we don't have anything in common but this kid.
Right, like you both kind of had the same goal, but you shouldn't necessarily have been with each other. You both wanted kids, you both wanted to be married.
Yeah, it's very much that, because we then start the next chapter of Sonia's life, because I want to make clear, this is where she and Sasha move out of her marital home to Carmel. So I don't have a date on the divorce from Stone. See, this is a real thing that's a problem here that I address in a second. It's a lot of spotty news coverage. And a lot of people who have different dates on different things. I don't have a date on the divorce from Stone, but at the time of the crime, Stone was Sonia's ex-husband.
Okay, and so you said that she had Sasha in 77, so within 4 years.
Yes. And so, yeah, just to make it clear, she was a single lady. And she moved to Carmel by the Sea, was the city's full name. And it's said to be known for white sand beaches. Ooh. And you can surf there. Yeah, like you can really be like a surf person. if you have either literally a ton of money or no money at all and all you want to do is surf, you can go to Carmel by the Sea. Because it's also said to actually be like a vibrant arts community.
That sounds nice.
Yeah, exactly. And at 30, Sonia was said to be enjoying her flourishing career, quote, at Levi Strauss and Company, the iconic jeans manufacturer, as a merchandiser.
I was like, I've heard of them.
Yeah, so Levi's. She was a merchandiser for them. So she's a single working mother at 30, good position at a good company, you know, and she liked to sew a lot. So it was a good fit for Sonia. She was
that sounds fun. I would enjoy that job.
Exactly. Yeah, because she also liked to sew. So there, I think I saw one picture, but it was like somebody reaching over measuring the Levi's, like showing them to a client, like, and maybe like stitching in real time for the like, oh, I want it more tapered here, it doesn't look good here, or whatever.
Right, like tailoring.
Yeah, I think that was a part of her kind of Rolodex as well, because we hear a little bit more from Sasha later, her daughter, about how she did love to sew. That's another thing about Sonia.
I get it. I love to sew.
I love, like, people who can make clothes stun me. I'm just like, oh, you can make, it's just a skill I wish I had. And she would have been such an asset to her community. Like, another young neighbor, she's only 30, ready to, like, support the area and raise her young daughter.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, I imagine she was likely thrilled to raise her in, like, a new and up-and-coming area and to thrive there. So it's so sad someone who was so clearly ready to embrace all that life had to offer was taken from us. Another strong, independent, joyous young woman who was the victim of the horrible things we're about to recount. I hate it. Speaking at National Crime Victims' Rights Week in April 2023, Sasha Stone, Sonia's daughter, shared that Sonia was, quote, a best friend to a group of Montreal adventurous kids who grew up together and eventually moved down to California to pursue their dreams.
No.
I know. She was a beautiful bride. She was a wife. She was a hardworking, business-minded, independent, talented young seamstress, she said. She said, quote, she was my mother, unquote.
I love that she was able to hear all of those things, because I'm sure she's heard so many stories, but she was 4.
Yeah.
She was very young.
She was only 4 years old. Yeah, she was 4 years old when Sonia died. So, yes, it's so good that, like, she has these memories of her mother this way. I can only hope that she can hold those, because, you know, she just sounds, I think that's why this case has stuck with me and bothered me so much since I read about it. Because, like, I feel like this flame that shone so brightly in Sonia at Levi Strauss and in her life, being snuffed out is something that is not worth fighting for justice for, no matter how long it takes.
Right. Like, these cases that we cover, and so many more, we don't physically have the ability to cover as many as we want. Mm-hmm. That it's it's important to keep talking about, because like when things go cold for so long, like you want to see a solution. And this, you said that it was recently solved. This can be an example of that.
Yes. So, like, all your cold cases, just, like, have your Google alerts on. Because, yeah, like I said in the beginning, this case was solved in 2023 after being cold for 40 plus years. It lays cold. It's a wild ride we're going to go on, folks.
Yeah, it just shows it's always possible.
Yeah, exactly. It's worth fighting for that justice, fighting to bring someone before a judge to be tried by their peers on crimes. That's how the justice system is supposed to work.
That's the goal.
Yeah, exactly. Except some of these guys can't get it together. But we're going to talk about Sasha and a good guy, which is like a tag team I can always do. Seth Meyers, Amy Poehler. That's like the polarity opposite of what we're doing. But they are going to take up the flame of this case. And as soon as she was able to, Sasha continued to bravely advocate for her mother's case as it ran cold. And like I said, she wasn't advocating to a brick wall either. She had a figure in dogged pursuit from the very time of the crime until its resolution in Detective Linz Dorman of the Monterey County Sheriff's Office.
Oh, good, because it can be hard to, when you especially disagree with the police and don't get what you want out of an investigation, especially when it goes cold. But it's really nice to know that she had a detective that she trusted working on this.
Yes. And this man he is by the book. Like, he is doing everything he needs to do. And we'll see, it's another situation where he's like mentoring people to be a good detective.
Good. We need more of that. We need as much of that as we can possibly get.
Exactly, just leading by example.
Yeah, there could never be too much.
No, there could never be too. And so she thankfully has Detective Linz Dorman, because the tragic thing is that Sonia's murder occurred on October 15th, 1981. And it's here that I will say you all should check out defrostingcoldcases.com and Alice de Sturler's research, which provides different visibility into what happened on October 15th, 1981. And her website says that she is connected with the family to research the case.
Oh, good.
And the timeline is more specific. Yeah, so the website does say it. I hope that's true. But it is different. And this is where I'm also going to mention, like I already mentioned, there's some spotty reporting in different scenarios that have been laid out. Sturler's research seems sound, though, and I'm going to use part of it here, because in our first piece of spotty reporting, we failed to see anywhere who it was that found Sonia or what happened immediately. Yeah, like who found her. According to de Sturler, Sonia's body was discovered by a friend, Caroline McBride, and she was just inside the door that opened into her living room. Like, she was going into her house.
Oh, wow.
Another woman, it's like Katie, this is like 1981, and then like you warp forward, and then it's Katie Gallagher, like she's just a woman trying to get in her house.
Right.
It's wild. And so I will say I haven't seen McBride mentioned in other wider ranging reporting. I haven't seen it.
And you said a lot of this came out of Canada?
Yeah.
I wonder if they have different, like, anonymity laws where it's like you have the right to not be named publicly because you're not involved, type of thing. I don't know, but I just wonder.
That would make sense, because most of all of the coverage starts with the cops finding her. And according to W5 CTV News, detectives found Sonia naked and bloodied with pantyhose around her neck.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Her body blocked the front entrance door to her home. So that is according to the national news network. That's what they're saying.
So does it seem like her front door wasn't closed?
It seems to me like the front door was open. Yes, you'll hear it because on arrival, they're met with it was a violent attack, they said. It was a chaotic scene that first presented the pantyhose tightly bound around her neck. And it was apparently also clear that she had been sexually violated.
Oh, wow.
That's all they would say. They wouldn't be more specific because it's incredibly disturbing in the voice of the detective, Lynn Dorman. You can tell that he was upset by it.
Yeah, there's definitely those cases that you can tell stick with investigators.
Mm-hmm. And I do already see a lot of the photos coming out of Canada, something that I think is super respectful, which is a lot of blurring happening on forensics photos and autopsy.
Well, even like as you just kind of said, all it says is sexually violated. I think that's more than enough. We don't need to go into the details. I know that, like, obviously we do a true crime podcast, right, and we talk about this a lot, but you and I make a conscious choice a lot of the time to kind of leave it at that. And I just don't think you have to go more in depth because it can be traumatic to people listening. Like, unless it's like super pertinent to our story, you and I both consciously try to leave it at that.
Yeah. All I know is that it was disturbing enough that this veteran detective, years and years and years later, when he said sexually violated, the way he said it, his like voice wavered.
That's so sad.
And I was like, whoa. Yeah, I was like, whoa, I haven't heard, like he's like a salt and pepper old school detective. And you don't kind of expect him to crack. And you're like, whoa, oh no, this must have been horrible. And so he was clearly, it was severe enough he was upset by it. That's all we need to know.
And even just for like the way that you're describing it, it sounds absolutely awful. But there's also, maybe he doesn't have a whole lot of experience because in Monterey County, like you mentioned it earlier, crime is down. He might not have a ton of experiences with homicides themselves. And then when you see one that sounds like this, where it's truly horrific, that could scar him even more. Yeah. Very understandably.
Oh, yeah. Because we hear more from him. He says to W5 that it was evident that Sonia fought valiantly for her life. And he spoke to the fact that it, quote, would have been a very slow death.
Oh, it's so sad.
End quote. I know. She was in her own home, or trying to get in her own home, when she was just straight up attacked. She should have been safe, and instead she was met with even more of the horror we're going to hear here. Because Dorman said that this animal would have kneeled over her with his face inches from hers and was pulling the pantyhose tighter and tighter around her neck.
It's just sadistic.
Yeah. In the entryway to her home, on the street, you're strangling a woman. Because I just want to point out the average statistic of being strangled like this through manual pressure to jugular veins in the neck. I Googled it for this, it usually takes 5 to 6 minutes for brain death to occur.
Yeah, it takes a while. And just that description, that, like, it seems like there's almost joy that he would have gotten out of that, which is just like gut-wrenching. Yes, I agree. I feel like this was just something for him, he was going to do it right then, and he didn't care at all about anybody but himself and this woman that he wanted, whether or not she had any thought or say. Right.
I'm going to go ahead and like, we'll see, we'll get into it, but like 5 to 6 minutes.
That's a long time.
Yeah, the detective said he would have had his face inches from her. So she's, oh God, it's just, I feel like this is so heinous, and I wish I could take away the pain of knowing these facts from her loved ones. And she wanted to be with them. It was evident in the crime scene struggle.
Yeah, and that, like, just knowing that, it does bring you, like, a sense of pride for her, but it also just adds so much sadness at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so sad knowing that she wanted to be here. She wanted to be with, I mean, she has five siblings. She's one of 6. Like, she has her daughter.
Right.
Detective Dorman, though, he's like one of the first on the scene. And he's going to be the investigator that we're talking most about. And he could immediately see evidence of defensive wounds on Sonia's hands as she fought back against her attacker face to face.
Good for her, because that's hard to do.
Yeah, he's like staring her down, and she's fighting for, like, it's awful. But Detective Dorman is here. He picks up that Sonia's left ring finger was slightly broken. And the tip of it was almost a complete bruise, which would almost certainly mean that Sonia's nail had scratched the face or body of the perpetrator.
Right, like that was an impact wound.
Right. And so underneath that ring finger, too, there was, quote, a lot of foreign material, end quote, from the attacker.
Good. I hope that can be used.
Yeah. So we have, yes, because despite all this evidence that we've collected, we're in 1981.
Yeah, DNA isn't quite a thing, so I hope they collected it and they have the ability to test it in the future.
Yeah, there's not much yet to do with it. But Detective Dorman is turning the case over continually in his mind, as the department took decades to bring anyone to justice or keep a murderer from walking free. And also, though, it's no one's fault that technology was in its own evolution at this time, but it caused long periods of inactivity, leading many to label Sonia's case cold. Detective Dorman is actively monitoring, like, definitely dedicated to solving this murder.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why it's important that there's foundations and things that help support solving cold cases and testing financially. Like, that's really important that those exist, because these cold cases are very expensive to go back and test at this point. It takes a lot of time, and a lot of them just sit there because of that. Right.
And so I'm so glad you mentioned that, because something very much like that happens in Sonia's case.
Oh, good. I like to hear that. Like, there's one company I would like to just mention if people are interested in supporting that sort of thing but can't do a donation. Another podcast, Crime Weekly, has a coffee company called Criminal Coffee. And they donate some of their profits to solve cold cases, and they've actually been successful in this, where they've donated the money to do the testing and they solved a case.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. Because it's like even one, you guys, you know?
Yeah, it's just buying coffee.
Even
You're probably going
one.
to do it anyway. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, and drink your coffee and support cold case funds, because something like this will come together. But first, we're going to hear about the entire case and how we're still in 1981 and we're still in that timeline. And Sasha is growing into a young woman and was, by her own admission, angry that no one had been brought to justice for her mother's murder.
Understandable.
Yeah, like, in somebody on the street, like, just, this is heinous, like, did this to my mother. Sonia was at school, according to CTV.
Good. I'm glad she wasn't around for that.
Yes, she was not in the home. And I wish she would have specified how old. She says she was a teen. when she, quote, marched into Detective Lynn Dorman's office and said, quote within a quote, "Why haven't you reopened this?" End quote.
From how you've described Sonia, it sounds like she's very much her daughter.
Yeah. So I was going to say, this is kind of like their meeting, but as a duo to get Sonia some justice.
Good.
Like real justice. Because as we've said, Dorman was among the first on the scene in 1981. And he said, quote, "My first impression was that I knew this person had struggled for her life. Her clothing was basically completely removed. I couldn't tell what was around her neck, but it turned out to be her pantyhose." So, like, her own... I've seen the time gap between Sonia's murder and the case being closed, that the pantyhose had become a subject of debate. Some wondered if they were Sonia's own or if a killer had entered her home with the item as armed and intent to use it. But we do know now conclusively that these are Sonia's own pantyhose.
Oh, wow.
Some animal just attacked her and murdered her with her own clothing.
So does it seem like, I think you mentioned this, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding it right. It seemed as if she was like on her way home and this person came in behind her and she was trying to get into her apartment, or she was leaving and this person was right at her door or something like that, whereas the other way around.
My impression is that she was coming home because she did, like, we do have crime scene photos of the interior of the home. So
Okay.
she was able and active to grab at things in her living room as this event occurred. Where they found her body was blocking the door to the outside, just her main door to her home.
So she did get inside.
Yes. Yeah. At some point. Yes. Because we have crime scene photos. We have...
Because that changes a lot of like the thought process there. Because was like if he came in behind her, she got into the home and started to grab anything possible as a weapon. Was she then trying to run back out?
Yeah.
Because it adds, it's a very different...
Caught her by the pantyhose because he says, like, that she was almost nude.
But that also makes a big difference. Also, like, could she potentially have invited him in? Could it have actually started in the living room? Like, because that adds a different level of, like, could she have known him or not? That sort of thing.
It has the potential. And I think that's probably what Dorman is thinking right now. Like, all avenues are kind of open. He's probably wrestling with, like, the same things we are right now. Same questions. Like, did she know this person? Did she invite this person in? Did she ever, like, was she attacked from behind? Like, I don't have, like, autopsy records of what was the first wound on her body, that kind of thing.
Right. But it just, like, I'm thinking of it as, like, if it's as she's, like, trying to, like, run into her apartment and, like, thinking, like, if she's trying to get the key in because she knows someone's behind her, that to me seems like there's a higher likelihood of it being a complete stranger. But the fact that she was in the apartment, at least for part of the attack in one of the rooms, that kind of takes away.
She wasn't in a room. She didn't, and I don't know that she entered. I don't know. I know that the front door was on the street and it opened directly to the living room. And we have evidence of a struggle and a fight for her life in the living room. Which is the one that the door opens to. So I don't know if she, like, went further into her home, if there's any evidence of her, like, having a normal evening and then opening the door to this person.
Yeah, so that's what I was like, I'm not entirely sure. Well, even if she could have met up with somebody and they just, like, walked back together and invited him in for a cup of coffee or something, where it could have been, like, minutes.
Right.
Or it could have been the complete stranger following her.
Yes, exactly. And So Detective Dorman is he's really astute, and he took to canvassing the neighborhood on that all-important first day.
Good.
Yes, right? First day, he's out there. And one day after the murder, October 16th, 1981, he believed that he met Sonia's killer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, one day after. Dorman, he dunks. You'll see, he just dunks. And so he believes it's October 16th, 1981. And we are with Dorman. He believes he is meeting Sonia's killer. The man, his name was Michael Glazebrook. And at the time, he was 25 years old. And he had recently moved to the neighborhood right across the street from Sonia's home.
Okay. So close.
He is her neighbor, yeah. And then he, with his wife, so he's married, former Navy man. And all of those things to me on its face seem fine. They don't seem scary. And then, we dive into cases like this, and I'm like, God damn, like it's so scary. Like, this is just some guy across the street.
Yeah, we've done this enough to know that it isn't always what it looks like on the outside, and most of the time, it's not. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. And sometimes it's situations like this.
Right. And luckily, like I said, Dorman, he's like vibrating with this case. And when he spoke to Glazebrook, noticing immediately that he was, quote, incredibly muscle bound when addressing the detective. Just his first observation of him. He was wearing a t-shirt so he could see, like, all the muscles.
That's not necessarily weird, though, because he was in the Navy.
It's not. And it's California. It is, probably still warm, even though it's October.
Well, if he's just knocking on his door, too, he's probably just in his house, doesn't need a jacket or anything.
Right. No. And so it's a freestanding house. And so when Detective Dorman meets him, he's also wearing a, quote, filter mask for spray paint.
Okay.
So kind of similar, I'm guessing, to what we've all worn recently. And Detective Dorman asked him to remove it. And he said, quote, he's got this deep red scratch just under his eye, running down his right cheek, his jawbone, and then it slowly fades into his neck.
It sounds like a pretty deep nail scratch.
Yeah, it sure does. Because he also noted it was about 3 to 4 inches long. So, this dude's whole face.
Right.
So, and this is all, Dorman's immediately putting it together. It's all consistent with Sonia's left ring finger being slightly broken and bloodied, making that cut on Glazebrook's face, coincidentally, on the same side that material was found under Sonia's left ring finger.
Yeah, the pieces are fitting.
Yeah. And so thankfully, Dorman's notes from his first interaction with Glazebrook, they're very well preserved, and Glazebrook does not come off well at all in his first interaction with Detective Dorman. In the very first meeting, it's around 11 a.m., October 16th, 1981. Glazebrook told 3 different stories about where he was, what he was doing, and who he was with during the time of Sonia's murder.
Yeah, that's not a good look.
No. 3 separate. We'll link these in the show notes. I encourage you guys to look at them because you can see Detective Linz's notes where, like, the record has been entered, the real and true record of what he wrote down, and then he's clearly been researching it and like muddling over it because it'll be circled and it'll say story number 1, story number 2, story number 3. Yeah, like his notes are kept very well preserved, so I encourage you guys, we're gonna link. And he also stalwartly maintained that he didn't know Sonia, despite what we're about to hear.
Like, I understand you don't always know your neighbors, but you at least know them enough where it's like, you know who they are. Obviously, you know where they live.
Yeah, I've seen their face. I know they live here. But according to him, he doesn't know her at all. So, that's just an important point to remember here, that he doesn't even know her, according to this character. And upon the investigators' arrival, they asked him a very simple question. Quote, can you give us any information on the death of Sonia Stone? Glazebrook launches into story number 1. And he says to the officers that he had been working on his boat that morning until about 10 a.m., which the investigators had surmised when they encountered him, as he had one. And he was also wearing that filter mask and spray painting. The filter mask that had conveniently...
So he's saying he was working on his boat on the 15th, the day she was murdered, until 10 a.m.
Yes.
And so I'm just he was again saying I'm assuming saying that he's working on it when investigators showed up while he was wearing the thing again.
Yeah. I think that's what he wanted them to believe, that he had been there the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I had that right, since it's...
Yes. They are talking about the day before the day of Sonia's murder, which was October 15th. He said he was working on the boat until about 10 a.m. They're seeing the tools, they're seeing the boat. But also this filter mask that he has is conveniently covering this scratch.
Right.
And he then said to investigators that he didn't see or hear anything out of the ordinary that morning. And at around 10 a.m., left to visit his father and did not return home until, quote, early evening, end quote.
Okay.
So he also told investigators that his wife, Robin Glazebrook, was a teacher at a local school, and she had left the home at 7:30 a.m. We can notice here in this story that he mentions nowhere in there where he got a 3 to 4 inch scratch on his face. I feel like that's something that you would remember, maybe an incident that predicated it.
Yeah, but I can also imagine...
I got this giant cut on my face.
Right. I guess it depends on how in-depth he's going with these investigators, because it sounds like he's giving a fairly general, like, here's my timeline, not like, oh, I did this and then this happened. Like, I feel like, yeah, if you're sitting there, and especially if you are innocent, you're probably thinking, like, this doesn't look good, and you explain it.
Exactly. You're probably thinking, like, oh, damn, I gotta figure out a way around this. But yeah, it's clear to me, I mention here in a little bit too, and I'll mention here now, that he's clearly not wearing a watch. Because he's just throwing the time, from what I've seen, he's throwing the time 10 a.m. up all the time. Just like every 10 a.m., it was 10 a.m. Like, wow, you had a really busy 10 a.m. Everything happened right then.
Yeah, but I try to give a little bit of forgiveness for that sort of stuff, because we know the time more than we ever have because of cell phones and things like that. If you didn't have a watch...
Yes, it was the 80s.
Yeah, it's the same idea as, like, eyewitnesses aren't always super reliable, and a lot of that comes with timelines, because if you're not looking directly at the time, it's so simple to get it wrong that I give a little bit of leeway when it comes to some time frames. I'm not saying that, like, he's telling the truth.
It's not looking good
here, but it's not something I put a super ton of weight on.
Yeah, you're right. You know, especially because of the time period.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did think, I was like, I feel like he's just throwing 10 a.m. and stuff. Like, I was totally here at 10 a.m. Yes, don't worry, officer, here in my home, not doing anything.
And he very well could be.
He very well could have been. However, we're about to hear him shatter that for himself. Because investigators next asked him what I think is the logical next question. Quote, how did you get the scratch on your face? Detective Dorman mentioned to W5 he could tell that Glazebrook was, quote, on edge during this encounter. Dorman said, quote, he was fidgeting, he was hemming and hawing, and his voice was stammering. I'm thinking, boy, this guy is really nervous. This could be our guy, end quote.
You know, sometimes you just pick up on those things, get that gut feeling, and got to investigate it, right? But you still feel it.
You got to look into it. You got to make sure you follow up. You got to keep after it, you know? And I also like his little southern aphorism there, like, it was hemming and hawing, meaning hemming and hawing, I would say that would mean, like, body movements, like he's kind of, like, check it out, you know? We've all, those of us in the true crime sphere, seen the video of Chris Watts getting home when
Yep.
he didn't expect it on the body cam. And I think that is close to exactly what happened here. I think that Glazebrook just had a little more time to prepare because it was the 80s.
Well, also, like, I consider, like, hemming and hawing in this sort of situation as kind of buying time.
Yeah. And then he said
Like,
he was
even
stammering.
if it's subconsciously, like, you're trying to think of an answer. So
Right. It doesn't look good for you. Yeah. If you're trying to think of the
Yeah.
answer, you're like, what's a good one for them that I can throw up? Because then all they did was, this guy sings like a canary. Because all they did was ask him, how'd you get the scratch on your face? And then Glazebrook told investigators the second version of his morning. And so the story he tells them about this cut, buckle up. Like, remember, at this point, all they've done is introduce themselves as police, ask them if he can give them any information on the death of Sonia Stone, and then asked him, how did you get that scratch on your face? And he said the prior evening, October 15th, when Sonia was murdered, he had been, quote, cutting plexiglass in his garage when it splintered and flew into his face, end quote. Okay. He said that, he said that for this 3 to 4 inch cut, he was then hospitalized overnight at Community Hospital of the Monterey Peninsula. He then said to the investigators he had just been released that morning. So, like, you weren't...
Interesting.
Right. So you weren't working on the boat at 10 a.m. You were in the hospital? When did you get out? Like...
Well, okay, so I have a couple things here. The 10 a.m. thing could be fine. That still could kind of fit because he could have been doing boat stuff, cutting plexiglass for the boat at 10 a.m. instead of going to meet his dad, or maybe his dad took him to the hospital. Like, I don't know if he's, like, that's what he's trying to work here. But my thing is, so easy to check hospital records. Like,
yeah, exactly.
easy,
yeah, like
easy thing. Secondly, you're not going to be hospitalized for a cut overnight, especially because you haven't mentioned anything about stitches. Like, nothing that shows how severe it would be that would require a hospital visit.
Thank you. Yes.
That you're not going to be held overnight for that. Not buying it.
Yes, thank you. Upvote. All of that. That's the next part of my script. Because the thing is, this story you've told them now, Mr. Glazebrook, has rearranged the entire timeline you've given them. Because you suddenly have a hospital stay for a cut. Didn't receive any stitches on it. But they held you overnight. And yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that it really like fully contradicts is the I returned home late evening. Like, I think you can make that argument of the cutting the plexiglass was something in relation to working on the boat. You're still probably going to want to wear a mask because you don't want to breathe in those plexiglass fibers. But then also, why do you have a cut underneath your mask if that's what's happening? Like, there's a lot that doesn't fit, but I can understand the timeline narrative still could potentially work, except for that return in the evening.
He's trying real hard to make this work. And this is story 2, after just question 2. So all these questions, the same logic is definitely present in Detective Dorman. He is very much like, we're not just going to not follow up guy. I think he's a rock star. He had a partner with him, a Detective Snyder, who is not featured as much. Perhaps they want to remain Detective Snyder on the record. That's it. That's fair.
Well, Dorman could have also been the lead. Like, they could be partners, but Dorman could have taken the lead on the case.
Yeah. Because, so, we all have the same logic here. We're all in the same timeline and world as Detective Dorman. Because his next question was why he had been hospitalized overnight for a, quote, minor scratch.
Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah. Like, you were hospitalized overnight from 3 to 4 inch scratch. Okay, so, and then Glazebrook starts to spin his third yarn here. And that the cut to his face had actually happened that morning at about 10 a.m.
So the morning of the 16th, like an hour before the police showed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're telling me now that you just got... And so we talked about this a little bit. It's the 80s. I should have been more forgiving of clocks, but I do feel like he's just throwing 10 a.m. around.
Yeah, no, that's weird because also you're going with this whole narrative of I went to the hospital. No, I actually got cut an hour before I saw you.
Yeah.
And you can typically tell, especially with a fresh cut like that.
Yeah.
That a day's worth of healing. You can usually tell that is different than an hour.
Yeah. Yeah. So apparently in this third morning story of his Glazebrook's morning, apparently after being cut at 10 a.m., according to Glazebrook, he then went to the community hospital and he told the detectives that his mother was a surgical nurse there.
Okay, good to know. What's the relevance? Still don't have stitches.
Mm-hmm. You don't have any stitches, but you have clearly like a high impact scratch on your face. What's up, man? And it's just, Sam picks up right away that we've added another unnecessary detail here to this story. Like, what I'm hearing from him is like full of filler and like different stories, and suddenly he's trying to attach another person to his story.
That's really just like truly like fun fact. My mom's a surgical nurse. Like that to me, there's no relevance to the situation.
Right. Like, do you think she's going to alibi you out? Like, is that why you're bringing her up? Like, I don't...
Well, I can tell you, I'm pretty sure I know exactly what he's trying to say here, which is dumb, but he doesn't have... It's not going to be in hospital record. I think that's what he's trying to get at, is like...
Yeah.
She just took care of me, but I did go to the hospital. But then it's like, okay, call mom.
Right, yeah, so let's talk to her. Yeah, because... You hit on a really good point because both investigators noted that Glazebrook was wearing a yellow identification bracelet that one might use in the emergency room.
Or like a rave.
Yeah. So at some point he went to an emergency room, or he's half-assing an alibi here with a fake ID bracelet.
Is it like one of the ones that like say his name on it?
Yeah, they said an identification bracelet that... So it would have said his name. It would have had a timestamp. I think he's just kind of half-assing this whole
if his mom
hospital
is a
thing.
Surgical nurse, he could have snagged one.
Right. They're probably all over that house. I would imagine.
Not over the house, but even like, oh, let's have lunch with mom. I'm gonna go pick her up from work.
Right. Oh yeah. Go to work. You probably gonna need a bracelet. Yeah. So he could have obtained that somehow in a good way. Like, he could have just been seeing his mom and he's telling the truth. But
he wouldn't be wearing a bracelet. Like, if he didn't actually have a visit to the hospital, which if he has a bracelet, he has a record of it.
Right. So look it up. Yeah. So pull it up. So show me the record when he came in, you know, like you show me the intake form, you know, if you're not lying with just a bracelet that you had around your house, you know. And Detective Dorman says that he then asked Glazebrook to, quote, show us how he managed to scratch his face, end quote.
Great question.
Yeah, how'd you figure that out?
Because it should be an easy answer. Like, it should be, this is the position I was standing in, this is how it flew up, and this is how it hit me in the face.
Right. And we're going to talk a little bit here.
Also, what are you cutting the plexiglass with that it's shattering?
What are you doing? Yeah.
It depends. Like, I've done a lot of,
what are you doing with this plexiglass?
Like, DIY projects in my life. I've cut plexiglass. Like,
yes. Yeah. Exactly. What were you doing? Like, athletic plexiglass? Like, what were you doing? Because, okay, so let's talk specs here. Because Glazebrook takes them into the garage. And he showed them a piece of plexiglass. About 2 feet long and 1 inch wide.
Okay.
Glazebrook showed Detective Dorman, one end of the plexiglass that had approximately 2 to 3 little jagged cuts on the end. And Dorman noted each cut was about the size of his pinky fingernail, about a 1/4 inch. And Glazebrook then claimed to detectives that he cut the piece he was showing them off a larger square, and that these little 1/4 inch pieces were the pieces that then flew into his face
Nope.
and cut him, making a 3 to 4 inch deep red cut on his right cheek.
Not buying it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he's got. Exactly. That's what he's. I'm like, wow, bro, that's bad.
You could have said that you cut this 1 inch, 2 foot long square off. As you got to the last cut, it flipped up and the corner of it cut your face. That could create a much larger cut than these 1/4 inch chips.
Right.
That's what they are. They're chips.
Yeah, I don't know why he showed them those 1/4 inch tiny cuts. Like, that, this is what cut me. Because, like, I'm not buying it either. That
sounds like you had hesitation in cutting it. That's all it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
And where you probably didn't get a good cut, and maybe that first couple saws in, because you're probably using, like, a
box cutter or something.
Well, no, you might be using a saw, like an actual saw, depending on how thick the plexiglass is.
Don't worry, we will get to how thick it is.
Oh, if he used a box cutter, that has to be super thin plexi.
So, yeah, because he tells them that it came from a piece that was approximately 2 foot square of plexiglass.
Yeah, but you can have plexiglass that is like a 1/4 inch thick or like an inch thick.
Yeah, McDormand confirms that it was approximately 1/8 of an inch thick.
Okay, that's pretty thin, but at the same time, that's going to be hard to cut with a blade, I guess, because you can have different, like, flexibilities of it. There's a lot of factors, but...
I'm just trying to make it work for him. I'm trying to make this sound good. It doesn't. It sounds terrible. No, like, there's no... Because he's, like, showing it to them. He's like, look, it's plexiglass. Like, he's really kind of spinning out on this first interaction with them. He's not looking good.
Personally, I would also be curious to know what he planned on using that plexiglass for.
Yeah.
And why he was cutting it at that time.
And then why did it also require a spray painting filter mask?
Well, because especially if you're using a saw, breathing in that dust is dangerous.
Yeah, you don't want the shards.
But it doesn't make sense to get the cut underneath the mask.
The mask, yeah. And I just have a really hard time believing, like, I don't know why he highlighted those 1/4 inch cuts again, because they sound exactly like what you said to me, just like somebody, like, trying to start the thing. And I just have a really hard time believing that a 1/4 inch of plexiglass flew from that piece with enough force to make a 3 to 4 inch cut that the investigators have already observed is a deep cut.
Yeah, I can imagine maybe it's that flying off and giving you a little bit of a scrape. I'm not, like, I it probably can kind of act as like a paper cut. Like, you might bleed a little bit, but it'd be like maybe a 1/4 inch if it, like, scraped the side of your cheek as it flew by.
Yes, that would make sense to me. That would make sense. It's not consistent with what Detective Dorman is observing. He's right on track with us in confusion. Because Glazebrook he presented Dorman then with the plexiglass. Dorman leaves the note that it was, quote, the consistency of a cheap plastic 12-inch ruler, easily pliable and breakable, and approximately 1/8 of an inch thick, end quote.
Okay. You might be able to score that and then, like, snap it. I could see that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Possibly working.
Yeah. And so, using all these observations, Dorman noted, though, that Glazebrook's injury to his cheek was clearly made with a downward track and had force behind it.
Yeah. See, like what I even just said, like, it grazes your cheek. Like, that's not in that motion.
If plexiglass shatters on you, it's going to fly straight, like a stray shot. You know,
from
like, it's not going to be, from below. It doesn't make sense that it just flew into the air up into your face. And so, Dorman is luckily right with us. And he gave that great description of it, that it ran all the way down. It was under his eye, all the way down his cheek, over his jaw, and disappeared in his neck. So his whole
and I think also providing the context of like giving the example of a cheap plastic 12-inch ruler gives me helps me really understand what that plexiglass was like, and putting together those two things is even clearer that they don't match up.
Right. And he says, like, he's a very good investigator. He leaves the note easily pliable and breakable.
Yeah, I'm picturing those, like, colored plastic ones that you get for, like, 99 cents.
Exactly. So he's leaving good notes. He's making astute observations. And he also added to these notes that it's just not, we've touched on it a couple times, it's just not the kind of cut that would result from flying plastic, especially a small piece, and especially, like I said, flying upward toward his face against gravity. He also added, Detective Dorman adds, that Glazebrook's injury had started to show scabbing.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. It's like you can tell if it's an hour old or a day old.
Uh-huh. Exactly. So this cut had healed for at least a bit. And he's spinning this yarn. It happened at 10 a.m. today. The investigators are looking around. There's no blood on the plexiglass in the garage or present at all to their visual.
Yeah, it's
no
not
blood.
The story.
No, it's just not. Yeah, it's a really bad story, and now you've brought out a prop to support your very, like, bad story. And so then Detective Dorman and his partner wrap up this conversation with Glazebrook. But it's far from over. Because the next thing they did, which I think was smart, was they went right to the next door neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. Continue your canvassing.
Yeah, it's the 1980s. They don't have the Nextdoor app yet, so they literally just walk next door and are like, hey, what about that guy?
Can't stop your investigation there. Like, they clearly feel like this guy is not telling the truth and that there's a good likelihood he's involved based on what they're seeing, but you can't just stop. Mm-hmm. You can't be hyper-focused on him. Right.
And so they immediately went to the neighbor's house. And upon arriving at the door, the family is, the next door neighbors of the Glazebrooks are the Walters. And that makes their house kind of across the street from Sonia's as well, further down by a bit. Like, we would say, like, kitty corner.
Okay, like just one house over.
Yeah, like a house over. She's on the diagonal. See, the Walters are feminine. I just immediately, I'm like, women. But no, this is a family. And Mr. Walters greets the investigators. And upon arriving at his door, after asked if he could tell them anything about Glazebrook, he told investigators that he had noticed Glazebrook on, quote, several occasions, attempting to make a spectacle of himself and show off his muscles for the women who were Sonia's friends.
That's just so unappealing.
It's so like,
incredibly unappealing.
Like, excuse me. Like, I just get the picture of some guy in your, like, those, you know, you're in the park and, like, there's just bars there where some guy's, like, doing pull-ups. Like, there's a fire underneath them. And I'm like, bro, it's like 8 a.m. You're going too hard right now.
Well, see, that doesn't bother me as much. But, like, I'm picturing he's, like, in his driveway, like, washing his car.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yes. We're talking like, the Walters said that it was clear he was making a thing of it. He literally says he was, quote, Mr. Walters literally says he was, quote, flexing for them whenever Sonia had a girlfriend over. And he continued that the women, quote, as far as he could tell, paid no attention to him. End quote.
They wouldn't get my attention.
Exactly. So this man is a posturing creeper, bare minimum, according to his neighbors. First house down, Mr. Walters is like, oh, you wanted to talk about that guy? Yeah, he sounds like Gaston.
He does sound like him.
What are you doing? I mean, like, I just picture him, you know, like in those, like, high socks from, like, the 80s, and he's like, I don't know.
Oh, that's like, so funny. He is the 80s version of Gaston.
Yeah, he's so gross.
Gaston wasn't a great guy either.
No. And so the same day, 16th of October, we're one day after Sonia's murder, and it's around 1 p.m. They talk to Glazebrook at 11 a.m. And at 1 p.m., they're like this. It's a great example of how you should work the first few days of a homicide case.
Yeah, what makes me sad knowing all this, though, is like this all sounds fantastic, but I know it goes unsolved for 40 years.
Oh my God.
Like, I'm just waiting to hear why, because right now I don't understand why it did.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. So it's around 1 p.m. and they're not stopping. They're keeping working this case all day. So 1 p.m., Detective Dorman and his partner went to the school where Glazebrook's wife worked in an attempt to contact her. And recall, our posturing creeper is also married. I put in the notes. Like, ew.
Yeah, but that's really smart too, because
surgery on that
like
one.
they don't have cell phones, so they're not texting each other. And if she's at work, she's probably not answering a personal call. So you want to get to her before he talks to her.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. So they're married. And so the detectives arrived at York School, which is where she taught, asking after Mrs. Glazebrook. And they were told by a secretary that she had, quote, taken the rest of the day off because she had just learned her husband was being questioned by detectives and she was expecting us, end quote.
Oh, okay, so he did call. Okay. That also, like, I can't fault somebody for wanting to call their partner and say, this just happened. But if you're calling them and saying that this just happened and they're leaving work, there was likelihood some sort of panic in their voice that told them that they should go home.
Like get home right now. I gotta get the story straight. And I made you a part of one of the stories because it said that you left at 7:30 in the morning. It brought you into it unnecessarily. She's tipped off. She takes the rest of the day off. Which, girl, I don't blame you. I say that later. Yeah. If my husband, if I get a frantic call from my husband saying like, "Oh, I'm getting questioned by the cops," I'd be like, "All right, I'm out. I can't." I don't know what grade she taught. I don't know what, but teaching bare minimum, no, you can't. Like, I need to focus on this whole husband.
Yeah, if he's really sounding frantic and like nervous about it, that's all you're gonna think about.
He's sounding very nervous, and so she's expecting them. That's okay because Detective Dorman is kind of undaunted. And at 2 p.m. that day, they were able to ascertain her whereabouts and question Robin Glazebrook.
Good. Still moving quick.
Yes, they're moving very quick. And they were able to make contact with her at the home. However, when they did, Mr. Glazebrook was also present.
That's the hard part, is you want to try to get her at work because you don't want him around. You want a non-biased conversation.
Exactly. However, Robin, I kind of really like Robin. Because Robin she explains what happens. She told the investigators she'd taken the rest of the day off due to the emotional strain of the situation.
Yep.
Robin, I get it, girl. The struggle's real out here. And then she gave them more, though, in front of him. She said the day prior, the day of Sonia's murder, she had called her husband after 10 a.m. and no one would answer.
Okay. That could fit one of his stories.
She's unable to make contact with him. And that day of Sonia's murder, she arrived home at 3:30 p.m., telling the investigators that no one was home as well.
Again, that can fit one of his stories. He said that he was with his dad after 10 p.m. till early evening. It could fit.
Right. She said that she had no idea where her husband was on the 15th until finding him later at his father's house.
Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't give a time she found him there, but she did give the investigators something to go on. For all of October 15th, pretty much all of October 15th, 1981, Robin Glazebrook had been unable to contact her husband and did not know his whereabouts until the evening, sometime after that 3:30 p.m. arrival to their home, where she discovered that no one was home.
So to me, based on everything that you said, it kind of sounds like his first story to the police potentially was accurate. He left around 10 a.m., went to spend the rest of the day with his dad, and returned home early evening. But the boat part is what comes into question. Mm-hmm. Could he have murdered Sonia before 10 a.m. and then left at 10?
Yeah. So all we know now is that he was missing in action for all of October 15th to his wife. So.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that they're probably thinking with all of this is, why did the story change? Mm-hmm. Because if he just kept it consistent, like, this all matches up.
If he had kept saying the first thing, he would have been fine. But also, I mean, it's ridiculous because he was fine anyway. God. But so it's safe to say everyone's suspicion was mounting, and we have a problematic thing that happens here. Dorman and his partner devised a plan to get Glazebrook to the police station on a series of outstanding traffic warrants.
Okay, that's a pretty common tactic.
Yeah. And when Glazebrook arrived, he was booked, fingerprinted, and photographed. Their key was to get Glazebrook in a mugshot with the scratch.
Smart.
Yeah, as soon as possible, you know? So there is a mugshot, and we will share it. But from every version of the photograph I've seen, it's too grainy for me to see if there's a scratch there. I linked it for you, Sam, if you want to take a look at it. For me, it's very difficult to see.
Yeah, I could potentially see one, though. You see a dark spot underneath his right eye, where it looks like maybe it kind of goes down kind of towards the side. And then you kind of see another line at his jawline.
Right.
I could see that potentially being the scratch.
Yeah. The picture makes me want to put it into photo editing software so I can, just change so I can just change that contrast and be like, yeah, you can see, right here. But of course that's not admissible in a court of law.
Right. I would say with this, it absolutely could also be just a shadow. But I see where it would make sense that these couple of lines that are basically the same colors as the shadows, it isn't like a prominent, like you can see the skin texture of a cut or anything. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I could see where I imagine it being that makes sense with the description.
Right.
And he looks very 80s.
Yes. So 80s. Doesn't he? Doesn't he, though? Doesn't he? And then once again, the Gaston thing.
Right.
Let me repeat, 1980s Gaston. And he's there at the station. He's been booked, fingerprinted, photographed. And he also agrees to a blood test at this point.
Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Just what we want to hear. The blood test matched the blood under Sonia's finger, but it was an ABO test. Yeah. So it matches. It's helpful. It's not considered conclusive at all because it can only eliminate up to 70% of the population.
Yeah, it's a fantastic tool, but it's not.
Yeah, it's what they have. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like what they have. All they can do is match this blood type to so Glazebrook matches the blood type, but there's nothing that says it was definitively him.
Yeah.
Because lots of people have that blood type. So, okay, and then here's Glazebrook. I just don't understand. I'll explain why this happened and it went cold because it's,
Yeah, I'm at the point where I'm waiting for that because it doesn't make sense right now.
We're in the middle of it right now of why. Because the detectives then took to interrogating Glazebrook, and after much questioning of Glazebrook, who, recall, has been claiming this whole time to not even know Sonia. He does not know her. Now, he says to the officers that they had been engaged in an affair.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't know her all day. You haven't known her all day, bro, and now all of a sudden you're having an affair with her.
I understand that there's a lot of people who have affairs, and I understand they don't want to say it because they're afraid even if they say it to the police one-on-one, their partner's going to find out. I understand that. Right. So there are times where it's like, I can understand when a story completely changes, but there needs to be the other evidence that comes along with it. There needs to be some sort of proof that corroborates this new statement and how it's actually true versus the other ones.
Exactly. Because if you were engaged in an affair with Sonia, then there, to me, would be evidence of her arriving home normally and carrying on a normal evening and letting someone in.
Well, that kind of goes back to what I was bringing up earlier. Like, they could have just walked in the door and it could have been an invite in.
Right.
Based on the fact that there was at least some items grabbed from the living room, whether it was right at the door or something. The evidence potentially shows that possibility. It doesn't rule it out.
Yeah. So I just, I don't know. I would expect to see more of a trace of it doesn't really jive with the scene.
I'd like to see, like, tell me about her. Tell me about things that she's interested in. Let me see if it matches what's inside of her apartment. What might be in a journal. Something
Yeah, we
like
know
that.
Sonia. Tell us something about Levi's. She works there. Like, give us something.
Yeah, like, tell us about your relationship.
Yeah, make me believe this is true. Because then Glazebrook also says he was at the house the day of the killing, but he denied murdering Sonia.
Because he knows they took his fingerprints.
Right, and his blood. And Dorman is convinced beyond all doubt at this point that this is Sonia's killer. And I see why. I see why he's kind of zoned in.
I do too.
I see why he's kind of zoned in. But, so, we're about to get to the part of the story where we start to see some fumbling of the ball. And it happens. But with all this material, the investigators were then able to charge Glazebrook with Sonia's murder in either 1982 or 1983. Both years have been reported. So, again, spotty coverage there. And same source. So maybe
within
a typo.
A year or two.
But
that's...
Yeah.
It was fairly quick.
Fairly quick. Yeah.
Because she was murdered in October, too. So that could be within a year of her murder, potentially.
Yeah. We take all this material and we charge Glazebrook with Sonia's murder. And so Bob Moody was the deputy district attorney assigned as the lead prosecutor in the trial. And he said that he, quote, felt good about the case and that Glazebrook, quote, had said earlier he'd never been in her house. Now he puts himself there. That's huge. That's the ballgame, end quote.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying is, like, if there needs to be evidence if he's having this affair with her, because you can't trust any story he told at all unless there's proof specifically that one is true. And that should be the first one, or in this case, I can understand it being the last one.
Yeah. Because it's changed so many times, so how do we know, like, I can't...
Yeah, that doesn't look good to a jury, none of it. So I understand why you felt good about it.
Yeah. So, Bob Moody he's good. However, this game of ball is not going to play out the way investigators thought. Because prior to the trial, a judge ruled Glazebrook's admission that he was at Sonia's place the day of the murder was, quote, inadmissible due to police misconduct. The Monterey County Sheriff's Office had violated his rights, having picked him up on traffic warrants and instead questioned him on murder charges, end quote.
I can understand that. I know that's a fairly common tactic.
Stricken, yep. Mm-hmm.
But they might have pushed it too far, which is really unfortunate because they're really trying to do the right thing.
They are.
But if they didn't question him and only took his fingerprints and his blood and used that probably we wouldn't have the same issue.
Yeah, if they had just held him, but I understand why in those first few days you have to be extremely aggressive with questioning and that kind of stuff if you want to see it solved. But in this case, it was stricken, so they lost all the confession statements from Glazebrook, inadmissible to a jury.
Well, really only the last one, right? Because it's only what would have been said during that last one, which was the affair,
right?
And that he was inside the house. So that's all that was cut out. But if they had arrested him for these traffic violations, gotten his fingerprints, gotten the blood, and then paused and then wanted to do a follow-up interview and like went back to talk to him when he just happened to be in custody, that also probably would have
Right.
prevented this
This.
information being stricken from the record.
Yeah. Yeah. So Moody, though, said he still felt ready, though he commented as feeling like he had one hand tied.
Yeah,
So,
I get it.
Yeah. So the reason Deputy DA Moody was still in a good moody was that he had an ace up his sleeve for the trial. Like many DAs do going in, he had a star witness. Glazebrook was engaging in an affair, but not with Sonia.
Oh.
Another woman, as yet unidentified to me. I'm not sure if, again, maybe it's a privacy law thing. The same reason the friend who found the body's name is not mentioned much. But she's as yet unidentified. She had come forward to the prosecution confessing that she and Glazebrook were having an affair and that he had allegedly told her he was present in Sonia's home on the day of her murder.
Very interesting, because that could potentially really be used to his benefit if that wasn't stricken from the record. Because you can just say that he was with multiple women and that he did a lot of different infidelity, and like you could use that as like, he's telling the truth now. But since it's stricken from the record, they have to choose whether to bring it up or not.
Yeah. And so Moody he's happy because he again had the evidence to place Glazebrook at Sonia's through this woman who has come forward. However, to the shock of the prosecution, the woman then recanted her story.
Yeah, that's hard.
And
because you can't control that.
She told the court. So again, I'm thinking there must be some privacy law here because it literally is everywhere I read it. She spoke to a court, so she would have been on the record.
There could be like some sort of like gag order or
something like that.
Because this did happen in the States, but maybe it's just how they reported in Canada.
Yeah, it could be the reporting because, like I said, I leaned heavily a lot on Canadian coverage here, and there was a little bit of U.S. coverage, but not enough for what I needed. And so, we might be beholden a little bit to those laws. But she goes before the court and says that the police had been, quote, leaning on her, so she made up the story, quote, because she was mad at him, end quote.
As much as I hate to say it, we kind of see this a lot. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I can believe that this is true, but I can also believe that her original story is true.
Yeah, exactly. I believe both of these things are true.
I can also believe that he might still be pressuring her, so she recanted. Like, I think all of that seems to potentially have an equal possibility. Yeah,
and also, either way, this place is great. Glazebrook, like, this colors him for us because, like, he's shouting out saying he had an affair with Sonia, and he really is having an affair just with someone else. So he's a cad at minimum. Gaston again. Like, Robin is just good for Robin. She told the cops, she's like, I have no idea where he was.
Right.
Because, they had this woman, and she said she was mad at him, and they referred to her as his girlfriend in the reporting. So, I'm like, did y'all stay together? Like...
Right, yeah.
And so then making everything worse is this mugshot that was taken, that we looked at. The camera had failed to operate, and the gash was not entirely visible on his face, like we talked about. So
could be a shadow, could be a
could
cut.
be
hard to tell.
Could be a cut. Yeah. So basically, I just feel like the prosecution's case was effectively gutted. Like, everything they had to go in and nail him on this was either stricken from the record or recanted. So
yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, so the trial lasted 18 days. And in 1983, the jury returned that they were hung on convicting Glazebrook.
Hey, I'd like to see that to more than everyone saying, no, he's innocent. Like, I would much prefer that because obviously the prosecution's doing something to convince people.
Right. And 9 jurors voted to acquit Glazebrook. And the district attorney's office then declined to retry him for murder at that time. So he was now free to walk.
Good, because that means they can go back later.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they can file the charges again.
Yeah, go ahead and walk right now.
Yeah,
like,
that's
walk
not
right
double
now.
jeopardy if he wasn't actually acquitted.
Exactly. They declined to pursue those charges. Smart.
That's smart.
Because, yeah, exactly. Because they were like, maybe we can. And Detective Dorman, he's not ready to let go of Sonia's case and let it go cold. And Sasha is now old enough to participate in advocating for her mother's murder to be reopened.
Yeah, you said this was 83, so yeah, she'd be 16 at this point.
Yes, so she is now fully capable of advocating. And so we have a hung jury's free to walk. I like, that must have been devastating. I can't imagine it. And even after Dorman's retirement from the force in January 1992, he said, quote, "They were still on my mind." It's just one of the, one of those ones that he couldn't.
Right.
He couldn't. Dorman was said to have called the sheriff's office regularly to pick up any new information or pursuit of justice for Sonia.
I imagine that has to be so difficult as an investigator to get to the point of retirement when you have cases like this. Because you want to, I'm assuming you want to keep working them. You want to help to find the solution because you're so deep into it.
You've been working so long. Yeah, so long on some of these.
Yeah, sometimes it is really good to hand it off, and that can be super beneficial to get a new person's eyes on them. But I imagine that has to just be hard emotionally to walk away like that.
Yeah, to just walk away. Yeah, and yeah, like I said, he called regularly, so we see that he doesn't fully walk away. He doesn't say, like, I'm going to stop pursuing this. Because he's laser focused on Glazebrook as being the perpetrator. And I don't blame him. He has no alibi at all at this point. Everything he said is questionable.
Yeah, do we know if his dad came forward and said, like, yeah, he was with me, like, shortly after 10?
I didn't hear about the dad. No, I haven't talked about the dad. Or heard about the dad. So.
Because that's just, like, that does kind of give him an alibi for part of the day, but it doesn't. At
some point in the evening he arrived, or at some point in the day he arrived, but I have never seen a comment to reflect that he.
Were they able to determine time of death?
No, nobody mentioned that.
Because that obviously, if it happened at 2 p.m., that's a whole different story where.
Right.
Like, he very well could have been with his father, with the fact that his wife found him an hour and a half later with him.
Right. Well, she arrived home to their home at 3:30, realized he was not there,
and then you said
and went to
after.
go find out.
Yeah, but like still, that's a much narrower timeline than 9 a.m., 10 a.m.
Right. And yeah, I mean, he had a deep scratch on his face the day after that is scabbing, so.
Yeah, like the evidence is there, but you just need a little bit more.
Yeah, he was known to try to flex for women coming and going, and Sonia, the victim, has a broken finger with a fully bruised tip, like we mentioned, so there's definite defensive force, which matches the type of wound according to Dorman's inspection of it. However, this case would now run cold for over 40 years.
That's so long.
Yep. Shelved. And however, the force really rose up for Sonia's case and didn't let it go. They didn't let this one, and they thought, and my hat's off to them, because in 2010, Josh Sahat, a forensics expert and criminalist at the California Department of Justice, began running new tests on the evidence in Sonia's case. Because now it's 2010.
Yeah, they can do so much more.
Yes, we now have DNA, and now Glazebrook is really in trouble. Sahat's tests included the blood under Sonia's fingernail, and they returned a sample of male DNA. The end game of this was to get the sample and cross-check it against the vial, roughly 30 years old, of Glazebrook's DNA, the blood that he gave them. Drew. For the blood type test. Yes, yeah. They're going to find that vial from 30 years ago. This
is why they need to keep good records.
And keep the
evidence as long as possible.
So yeah, exactly. And they have. So that's their end game. However, I am like thrown up. I'm like, I'm sorry, this happened next. Because, however, in 30 years, things happen, and they sure did here. Because at some point over the years, the vials of Glazebrook's blood broke.
Oh, no.
Yeah, bad. And for some reason, they were kept near Sonia's fingernails that had been collected. I imagine probably in the same evidence locker. I don't.
Or even like the same box or something.
Yeah, close to them. Because the sample had spilled onto the same envelope where Sonia's fingernails had been kept.
Yeah, they're probably kept in.
So his DNA is now there.
Versus plastic bags.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so Sad said, quote, I'm thinking it could be Glazebrook, but I don't know for sure. And the reason he says that is because the samples were so degraded over the years. They had been kept that it was only possible to make out a faint male profile.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's what they've got. The only way to get what they needed was to obtain another sample from Glazebrook.
We'll have to do the Amber Creek, what they did for Amber Creek.
Mm-hmm. They need another blood test. Yeah. And the Monterey County Sheriff's Office was lacking in funding and resources. And due to this, they were unable to pursue getting another sample. So this shelved Sonia's case again until 2013. And I can only imagine the frustration here, but also the depth of sadness. Because we have Sasha, her daughter, here, and she must have felt that, knowing her mother's killer is walking around free.
Yeah, because at this point in 2013, she's, what, 35?
She's grown.
36?
Yeah.
Or
she's
45,
born
46?
77.
77?
I believe. Yeah.
So
she's grown. She knows what's up. She was 4 when it happened, but she's a grown woman now, and she's not about to let her mother's murder go unsolved. And I love it.
Yeah, she could very easily have a family of her own, easily.
And so now we're gonna get into that fun part where Sam mentioned it way up top. In 2020, the Monterey County District Attorney created a task force focusing on dozens of cold cases where DNA evidence was available. And this caused the reopening of Sonia's case. Yes. Yeah. 2020. So they're like, okay, here, this is it, y'all. We're getting it. There's evidence in it because I think the key here is where DNA evidence was available.
And even between 2010 and 2020, that advancement in DNA technology grew so much.
Oh my gosh. Wait till you hear the numbers. The case is reopened. And I imagine a lot of this is due to the dogged efforts of Sasha and Detective Dorman, who is still involved. And it's assigned to Detective Eris Wilson. And Wilson immediately took to Dorman's notes and even reached out to him to discuss the details of the case.
That's the way to do it if you can.
Yes, exactly. Detective Eris Wilson and Detective Dorman performed this sort of mentorship exchange of power thing with the case in a beautiful fashion.
Nice.
There's a beautiful fashion of him handing him the case. And all we needed is this final piece. And the final piece is Detective Eris Wilson, because he believes it can be solved and he is not going to stop. And however, we as kind of a group who listen to true crime know that cold cases can be really difficult. Witnesses die, move, or forget. And evidence is shelved and reshelved and cases carry on. So, and also in 2020, Glazebrook was for all the world an upstanding citizen. He was a Little League coach and a Little League umpire and a school bus driver.
Yeah, I hate it, but
I hate it.
It's not super uncommon.
Not uncommon at all. Giving me BTK vibes, BTK,
looking
for that cover. Yeah,
we could name so many of them.
Yeah, he's trying. He's not executing. And I did leave the comment that, these are all things Sonia would never get to do or never get to see her daughter do.
Yeah.
I hope you had fun in the Little League, Michael, and driving the school bus, because DNA is about to roll up on you. Because in early 2021, a search warrant was finally obtained for Glazebrook's DNA.
Good.
And it was obtained by a mouth swab in Detective Wilson's patrol vehicle, Eris Wilson. So, side note, he is pulled him over at a light, and literally he was like, I have a warrant for your DNA, and Glazebrook tried to be like, I want an attorney, and he was like, no, that's the whole point of the search warrant, is that you have to give me your DNA.
Yeah, you gotta try. Yeah, you gotta try.
Yeah, he tried to get out of it. He was like, can I have an attorney? And he's like, that's not how search warrant works. So here's the mouth swab.
Like you can, but do this first. Like, this is required.
Yeah,
and
you
we'll
can.
get you an attorney.
Right.
Like, you want a public defender?
Right.
We'll set that up.
Exactly. We'll set you right up. However, this is the search warrant is for your DNA. So he swabs. Michael Glazebrook goes ahead and gives his mouth a swab. And after testing the sample, Wilson said, quote, it determined that the blood under Herok-Stone's fingernail, Sonia's fingernail, was Michael Glazebrook, with the odds of it being anybody else other than Michael Glazebrook 1 in 46 quadrillion.
Good.
End quote. Yeah. So basically, just like Sam said, good. Because if 1 million billion guys are standing in one room, he's in it, it's still him. That's so many. That's so specific. That's so many. Like, it's you.
And that came as absolutely no surprise to anyone.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, I'm sure Dorman, Detective Dorman and Sasha were like, oh, like a chapter close. Thank you. Finally, because then in August 2021, it came and Glazebrook was again charged with the first-degree murder of Sonia Herok-Stone.
God, it's first-degree murder as well.
Yeah, first-degree murder. The prosecution and the sheriff's office, they were worried about the sketchiness of the blood contamination being used, that
sure.
DNA. And I understand they were worried about that. And so Detective Wilson got out ahead of it. He spent months painstakingly reviewing the DNA in Sonia's 1981 sexual assault kit.
Oh, I'm glad they have that.
They still had it. Yes, exactly.
So glad they have that.
Yeah. They still had the kit from 1981, and it contains several swabs from under her breast that were reviewed. After all this work, Detective Wilson was able to obtain a separate sample of DNA from those swabs.
Fantastic.
Yes. Second sample. This DNA also came back as consistent with Michael Glazebrook. So, they're now ready to take this before the courts with 2 separate DNA identifications positively saying it was Michael Glazebrook. So, Wilson had cracked a decades-old cold case, and he said, quote, it was the last thing that we needed to be able to prove to a jury beyond any reasonable doubt that Michael Glazebrook was the killer.
Yeah, if he has an option for a plea deal, it's going to be your best bet.
Yeah. I love to hear that because it shows that this investigator understands how the justice system as a whole works as well.
Oh, yeah.
And how you might pursue the right thing, and he gets out in front of that blood contamination, a possible defense there, and that second strain, like, all due to doing his due diligence.
Yeah, it took away anything circumstantial, and the few things that are left that are circumstantial are pretty irrelevant because of this.
Right, exactly. And that was their goal. That was his goal.
Like, you can take everything that's circumstantial out, and it still shows it's him.
Right, because the jury needs to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that he is the killer. And so they made sure, Detective Wilson and the force made sure that there was a second strain of DNA there. And in June 2023, the case again went before the court. Only this time, Glazebrook's noose had hung him. He was 67 years old and convicted of first-degree murder.
Yeah, he's spending the rest of his life in prison.
Oh, yeah, he's not seeing another day. Because the sentencing was just what I wanted, which was a big old LWOP. Glazebrook was given life in prison without possibility of parole.
Yeah, he's never getting out.
No.
He doesn't deserve any more time.
No.
He got a lot more
you've
than
You've
he
had
took away.
so much. Exactly. You've had so much time where you were just prowling the earth, living your life, having a good time, knowing that you did this. You did this horrible, horrific murder to a single mother of a young child who lived across the street from you because you wanted to. Because none of us should hold our breath for this monster. There's still no confession from him as to what he did. No confession at all. He's shown no remorse.
He has too much pride.
Yeah.
He will never admit to it.
No, he's shown no remorse. Even as he got swabbed by Detective Wilson in 2021, he still hadn't gotten his story together. Wilson asked him if he knew Sonia. And decades after he had admitted to having an alleged affair with her, Glazebrook told Wilson, quote, no, never even met her.
Maybe he thought when the judge said strike that from the record, he thought that meant memories as well.
Right. Yeah. Like we all just deleted that. Like I'm like, we
say apparently he did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're like, remember you said you had an affair with her? He's like, no, I don't know her. Like, oh my God, for fuck's sake, dude. Come on. Shut up. He sickens me, and I don't like to take delight in others' misfortune, but I'm filled with joy that they threw the book at this man.
Yeah, he deserves to stay in prison.
Yes. Go to prison the rest of your life. You're just victimizing women out here in these streets who are just trying to get home. And the arresting officers, when they brought Glazebrook in, also all wore Levi's jeans as a nod to Sonia. Yes.
That's really sweet.
As a nod to Sonia. Yes. Sonia's life before she was victimized by this man. She was a Levi's jeans merchandiser. She could sew. She loved to sew. And so all of this, all of them knew this case, and all of them were, happy to see its closure and wanted to, show the victim's life. I think that is just, yeah. I mean, it's another big screw you to Glazebrook, but I love it. I love it.
It's a good one. It's a very good one.
Yeah, that's a nice touch. I was like, that's a nice touch. I like that. And as for Sasha, she is now 46, and she's channeled her energy into advocacy.
Oh, that's great.
I know. She bravely crusades for victims' rights and restorative justice, an approach that encourages offenders to take responsibility and recognize the harm they have caused through discussions with the victim and community members. On this, she said, quote, work in restorative justice is having great success stories of people actually understanding the impact of what they did. Let me make better choices. So we're not just releasing them back onto the streets and causing the same problem, end quote.
Yeah, I think it's easy for me to say this as somebody who has not been impacted from a crime like this, but to me that seems like that's kind of the best outcome you can hope for. Like, obviously I still hope that there is still punishment involved, because I don't think an act like that should be going unpunished, but you hope that is paired with somebody who has that realization of how their actions impacted everyone else around them and how devastating that is.
Yeah, to everyone, to the community at large.
Yeah. You hope that is paired with equal punishment that it is deserved for the crime that they committed.
Right. Yes, exactly. That also, it goes hand in hand. And I think it's so noble of her to do this after losing her mother. She easily could have relaxed into the safety of knowing that her mother's killer was behind bars after all those years. But she bravely fights on for justice for everyone, which is something of a motto of mine.
Yeah, she just understands that unfortunately this is not gonna end. We are going to have tragic and violent crime. It is
right.
There's no way for us to ever get rid of it, which makes me very sad. But
right.
It's the fact of life. And to have people like her fighting for the people who, in all likelihood, are very much struggling with what has happened in their lives.
Yeah.
It's nice to have somebody who can understand what you've been through in that situation.
Exactly. Because she's still, like I said, justice for everyone. And early on in this speech, like, she fights for victims' rights, because we took her statement early on about her beautiful mother, and it was she was speaking at the National Crime Victims' Rights Week in April of 2023. So she is very much like,
good to see,
at the forefront. Yeah, she's very much at the forefront of this, and perhaps changing the lives of a few offenders. What more can we all hope to do, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So that is the full story of Sonia Herok-Stone's murder, and the final blow to a 1980s Gaston who thought he was bigger than the law and walked free for years. Sam, do you have any final thoughts on this one?
Oh, well, we talked a lot in this one, so I think
we
you all
did
know my thoughts. It's so sad, but I am so happy to see that things were put in place to do the right testing, to do the follow-up decades and decades later.
Yes.
And then to be able to do even more follow-up by that second set of DNA testing, when you didn't even know that was going to be a possibility in the future.
Yes.
I think that's fantastic.
You kept them. Yes,
I'll give it another shout out, Criminal Coffee, because they're the ones that are helping solve cases in the same exact sort of way by funding that testing. So I'm a big fan of them.
Exactly, and giving them the resources to create these task forces for unsolved cases. You know, so
absolutely.
And that's what did it. You know, it's a beautiful example of kind of the handoff of a case. Like, I mean, the two men, I keep saying Dorman and Wilson actually continued. They had a close relationship.
Yeah, I hope that this is a case that can be studied for like best practices.
Yeah. And
even using the example of when they had that portion of questioning stricken from the record. That's a good example of how to not do it, and
how to not do it. Yeah.
Learning ability for potential students going into criminology or something.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, like, earlier I used the word that there was kind of a form of, like, almost mentorship here that he created, like an air of this. He'd left this trail, and now this detective is walking it, and he is giving him everything he has, you know, by continuing to work the case with Sasha. So
yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah, it's a great outcome.
Well, thank you all for listening to Have You Heard About This Case? If you liked this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow our show on Spotify and now on YouTube. And you can find us on Instagram at Have You Heard About This Case Pod, on TikTok at HYHATC, or you can email us at haveyouheardaboutThisCase@gmail.com. Thanks, and we'll talk to you later.
Bye!